Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Sayfie here with Anthony Broome on a Thursday. We're going to preview Michigan against Indiana as we start the back half of Michigan's football season. We will talk about the Wolverines here at the midpoint. We'll talk about each side of the ball, kind of what we've seen so far, and touch on the Hoosiers, and then get into our predictions for this game. We'll also pick a couple games against the spread from around the country. Pretty good slate in college football this week. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like the video if you hope Michigan goes undefeated for another regular season. So hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe to our channel. You get all of our content right when you pull up YouTube on either your app or the desktop. You'll get all of our content right to your front page there. And head to thewolverine.com for $1 for your first month of premium access. But Anthony, second half of the season, we've had a busy week so far. How you doing over there?
It's flying by, man. And we wait all summer for football to come. And then once it gets here, you blink and you're 6 weeks in. And in a lot of ways, we still have things that we want to find out about this Michigan team. We know that November gauntlet is coming. Another week goes by where you get just a bit closer to that, but excited for it. Nice to be back in the friendly confines of Michigan Stadium on Saturday. It's going to be a little ugly outside. It looks like, at least, in terms of cold, rainy. Thank God for the press box for that perspective. But yeah, excited to be back. And it's just another week where I feel like, not to give away all the state secrets of what the show will be like, but I just feel like this one's probably going to look like the rest of them have.
Yeah, so it's obviously kind of more of a boring game. So that's why we're going to talk a little bit more about Michigan specifically here at the midway point. But you're right, back in the big house this weekend. Only one other home game after this outside of the Ohio State game at the end of the year, which I almost kind of put in a different bucket. I mean, it's kind of its own season, totally different feel. So it's just this game and then the Purdue game at the beginning of November. And then Michigan's on the road. Other than that, obviously some big road games coming up. Penn State, Maryland in November, but Michigan State in a couple weeks before the bye. Let's talk about the Wolverines a little bit and just how dominant they have been, and just a couple different streaks that I was kind of pulling up for an article this week where, they've won every game by 24 or more points. Obviously, we know that, but I was looking, okay, when was the last time this has happened? Maybe it's never happened. Maybe it hasn't happened since the early 1900s. It did happen in 1992 when our analyst Doug Skeen was on those Michigan Lions, winning 5 Big Ten championships. They beat Oklahoma State, Houston, Iowa, Michigan State, Indiana, Minnesota in that stretch. They go 9-0-3 on the season, win over Washington, now Big Ten foe, in the Rose Bowl. And if they win this weekend, it'll be the first time with 7 straight wins by 24 or more points since 1976, when they beat Stanford, Navy, Wake Forest, Michigan State, Northwestern, Indiana, and Minnesota. Michigan's not just winning. They're not just winning pretty big. I mean, they're winning in blowout fashion every week. We talked about it on Monday where J.J. McCarthy has attempted 4 passes in fourth quarters. But when you look at it historically, AB, what comes to mind when you see just how dominant this Michigan team has been?
Well, again, that's adjusted for the caliber of schedule too. And so being that you're in the same breath with those teams, to me is, I won't say it's irrelevant, but I look at it more as, when you look at what the storyline with this football team is, that they haven't played anyone. Okay, I get it. No one on there is going to shake, have you shaking in your boots. You're not afraid of the teams you've seen so far.
UNLV,
hey,
though.
The go-go offense is working. They're 4-1 this year? So shout out to the running Rebs. But yeah, I mean, so much of it, and this is the conversation we had on Monday, where so much of it is what it's looked like so far. And, haven't really seen this team break a sweat other than the Bowling Green game, where the only reason you were breaking a sweat at all is because of self-inflicted wounds. So for me, it's just, I think it speaks mostly to the way that this team is handling its business. I mean, this is a veteran group. A lot of the guys on this team making plays or that are in prominent roles were on the team in 2021, 2022. And, they really are one game at a time personified. There might be little blips on the radar that come up here and there, but that's football. I mean, you chase perfection, but the fact of the matter is that within the prism of a 60-minute game, you're never going to be perfect. And when you are, it's going to look like, what it looked like at Minnesota or what it looked like at Nebraska. So For me, it's a continuance of just taking care of your business. There's nobody on the schedule the next 3 weeks that think has the bodies or the caliber of talent it's going to take to put a scare into you. And again, you just have to keep attacking it and handling your business, and the narrative is going to continue to be what it looks like. If you struggle against Indiana, again, I know and that could happen this weekend. The weather's going to be a little crappy outside. Michigan State's a rivalry game. There could be some weird stuff that happens there, both on and off the field, as it turns out. And then Purdue has actually played some decent football at times. So it can happen. You always have those games where you play a little bit uncharacteristically, but I think they've already played one of them. When you look at that Bowling Green game, to me, it's just been business as usual throughout the season.
Yeah, so Michigan now at 18 straight wins in Big Ten play, 5th longest streak in conference history. If they win a 19th in a row, which you assume they will on Saturday, as 33.5-point favorites, I believe, that would match the Michigan program record, which they set back in that kind of window there, 1990 to 1992. But yeah, very impressive what Michigan has done so far this season. And then the second one I wanted to talk about real quick is 76-0 in third quarters, just how dominant Michigan's been coming out of the halftime locker room. I think probably more gets made of halftime adjustments than really should be. I mean, it's a great talking point. They do make halftime adjustments and they do work, so you have to give them credit for it. I think a lot of it, though, is just, that this team as a team, kind of knows that what it needs to do as it continues on throughout a game. I remember some guys last year kind of laughing about all the questions about halftime adjustments because they're like, man, we just keep playing our game. We just know that it'll click at some point. And then you have to credit the strength and conditioning as well. But I mean, to not give up any points in the third quarter this year, and then you can't really take any stock in the fourth quarter margins because of the backups coming in every single game. But your thoughts on the way Michigan has really handled itself coming out of the halftime locker room?
Well, the secret of football is that you're always making adjustments. You're making adjustments in game. You go to the locker room, you collect yourselves, and maybe that's your longer form opportunity to draw up some new things and get guys settled down. But the fact of the matter is that when we talk about the caliber of teams that Michigan's playing, is that I mean, early on, the way that Michigan plays, it's very much kind of a I don't want to say lull you to sleep, but we talk about the boa constrictor, right? Where it takes time. It's a bit of a slow burn. I think these third quarters are just water finding its level. It's, we've played 2 quarters of football. We still feel fresh. We have been the aggressor. We are going to continue to wear teams down and kind of dictate what these games are going to look like. And that's how you get 77-0, because you have better conditioned guys, you have better players, and you're doing what you should do to teams that just don't have the dogs to hang with you. So being what it is, I think that's the biggest thing for me, is that the reason and Jesse Minter deserves a ton of credit. The whole coaching staff deserves credit for keeping that focus, for hammering home that, always play like games are 0-0 and every play matters. And when you do that one snap at a time, one series at a time, and you're as talented and as deep as Michigan is, that's what third quarter should look like against these teams that, quite frankly, just they just can't hang. That's the simplicity of what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's get more into this game, more on Michigan as they head into the second half of the season. I did want to mention the weather, as you mentioned a couple times, but it's going to be rainy. It looks like winds up to 15 miles an hour. And we also have a very unique partial solar eclipse. According to NASA, the sun will be obscured by about 35% over the course of the eclipse in Ann Arbor. It will start just before noon, minutes before Michigan kicks off at the Big House. It will wrap up around 2:20 p.m. So it's going to be cloudy anyway, so I don't know how much of an effect it will have, but it'll be interesting. We could get a light show for a noon game at the Big House. What do you think?
Could be interesting. My suggestion would be don't stare directly into the sun. That's not smart for anyone to do, but yeah, if the sun's out, that should be something that's cool. I remember a couple summers ago when we had that one, it was cool to step out on the back porch and check it out, but don't look directly at the sun. That's the PSA for the day.
Yeah, you got to get those special glasses, right? I think.
That's right.
So that'll be interesting, I guess. Tickets kind of coming down a little bit price-wise at the Big House on Saturday. Before we move more into this game, I want to talk about our friends over at Prize Picks. Football season is back. We're at the midway point of Michigan season. There's no better way to enjoy the games than by playing daily fantasy with Prize Picks. You pick 2 to 6 players, predict if they will go more or less than their Prize Picks projection. That could be for touchdowns, yards, all that sorts of stuff. You can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. All first-time users that deposit and use promo code Wolverine will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. So if you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, they'll give you $50. Again, that's promo code Wolverine for a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. We made some picks this week, as we do every single week. Anthony, I got J.J. McCarthy against Indiana, more than 217.5 passing yards. They've been torched by opposing quarterbacks this year, whether that's running the football. I forget which game it is. They allowed the quarterback to rush for over 140, one of their early games. And then especially throwing as well against Talia Tagovailoa, Maryland a couple weeks ago, 352 yards for him. So I got him there. And then Sam Hartman for Notre Dame, I got him more than 263.5 passing yards against USC. I have absolutely no trust in that USC defense, so that's the reason there. But that will be a fun game, and we'll talk more about it later on. But what are your picks for this week?
Yeah, I'm going with Thursday Night Football, Patrick Mahomes against the Denver Broncos, who have been terrible defensively this year. This is the easiest pick of the year for me. I have more than 268.5 passing yards for Mr. Mahomes, and apparently Taylor Swift will also be in attendance, so got a boot. That's another good boost for the Chiefs and Travis Kelce, who I think will play. And then I'm actually, for the first time in a while, I'm going to go to baseball. I've got Ronald Acuna Jr. and Bryce Harper combining for more than 3 hits plus runs plus RBI. Pretty big game, elimination game for the Phillies as they try to move to the NLCS. So playoff baseball starting to heat up a little bit. Love the ALCS matchup that's coming. And it looks like the Phillies might be on the verge of punching their ticket as well. So excited for those.
There you go. Mixing it up a little bit, throwing baseball in the mix. I like it. So yeah, they got just about every sport you can think of over at Prize Picks. So that's prizepicks.com, or download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code Wolverine for an instant deposit match up to $100. Again, promo code Wolverine. Let's talk about Michigan's offense a little bit. And then we'll talk about them going up against this Indiana defense. But I really think the offense has started to click a little bit more over the last couple of weeks. It has coincided with the offensive line combination, the new one that they put into place against Nebraska with Ladarius Henderson at left tackle. You got Carson Barnhart swinging over to the right side. Jim Harbaugh praising his willingness to do anything for the team this week, talking about how the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. His dad is a union worker that has apparently helped Jim Harbaugh with some skid steering and a project up at his cabin, which we wrote about this week. But I just think that combination has really started to click, and maybe they would have anyway with the other one. But I think this O-line as a whole has started to gel. You see the run game producing at a higher level. And then I think they have been more balanced than people realize. You look at it, and yeah, they've run the ball a lot because they've had big leads. But last week, I think it was 22 run plays and 21 pass plays when J.J. McCarthy was in there. They're letting him do his thing, and he's kind of the focal point of this offense at this point.
Yeah, he's in complete and total command of this thing right now. And whether it be finding a guy to get the ball to through the passing game, whether it be pulling the ball and running on his own, he's still, being a Michigan quarterback, you got to be adept at the good old fashioned handoff as well. And by golly, he does that as well as any quarterback in college football too. So, the offense is just firing on all cylinders. And I think a big part of that is, I think we're seeing that offensive line finally gel and come together. The tackle situation has kind of played out the way that I hoped it would, where Ladarius Henderson is a better fit on the left side. Carson going over to the right side, kind of just, everything that ailed him on the left side, I feel like is the opposite on the right side, just because you're more comfortable there. I know he's a versatile guy, but it really is like doing something with a different hand. So for me, they've hit their stride there. I think the offense too, there hasn't been, In any other scenario, you sit here at midseason and Donovan Edwards only has 177 yards rushing, and that's jarring, right? When you look at that on paper. But the fact that Khalil Mullings has emerged in recent weeks has been a huge development for this team as well. I think that, and I do think Donovan Edwards is close to a breakout. I think he will turn things around in the second half of the year. But the fact that you have that third guy now, and you have Blake Corum already, who I think looks like his old self, but hasn't had to take on those, 20, 25, 30 carries like he did, because one, you're blowing everybody out, and two, you are pretty deep at line or at running back. So for me, it just, hitting their stride, everything looks good. It all starts with the quarterback. He's been a maestro. He's not making mistakes. He knows where to go with the football. And the numbers aren't gaudy, but the only stat that really matters is wins. And the way that they move the ball, it's they're the slow. I saw this stat earlier. I believe they're the slowest moving offense in America.
I saw that.
That's fine. I mean, if that's what it looks like, and you're kind of just grinding teams into a pile of dust, I have no issues with that. Stats be damned. This is as good as Michigan's offense has looked to me in these last 3 years.
Yeah, and you can see the upside, I think, because of the quarterback play too. I mean, maybe last year, if you look at some of the numbers, it was producing at a higher level. And again, we have to wait longer to see not only the sample size go up, but also the competition when the starters are in the whole game, that sort of thing. But you can just see the upside with this offense. Like third downs, I mean, how efficient they've been staying on the field there with J.J. McCarthy if he needs to, extending plays. You got the big tight ends. I think, Colson Loveland, we all know what he's done, but A.J. Barner, I think, an underrated piece on this team. And then Roman Wilson, like when those plays do break down, when J.J.'s running around, I mean, no one's better at getting open than him. So just the efficiency of this offense, even with playing that slow. And I think that's probably by design with the clock rule. I mean, we complain about it as fans. And I know that's died down over the last few weeks, but I think Michigan's kind of using it to its advantage. And I will say as well, I think Sharon Moore deserves quite a bit of credit for what he's done with this offense in the first half of the year. You can see they're a little bit more willing to, when those teams are stacking the box, they're throwing it a little bit earlier, not only in games, but, in a series, first, second down. Play action numbers don't seem to be running it a lot more than in the past, but they do seem a little bit more willing to go to some of that earlier and kind of at different points when they need to. So I think it's been pretty crisp from a play calling standpoint as well. And then we've seen a couple, creative trick plays too that they talked about this week that, that they've set up. And I think that's a credit to this, this offensive staff as a whole, but especially Sharon Moore, Jim Harbaugh, the guys really in charge there. Going into this week, like you said, could be, it'll be a weather type of game. So you gotta play a little bit differently depending on how bad the weather really is. But Indiana, like we said, I mean, they got torched against Maryland. Their defense has not held up really in any of these games. They actually did a better job against Ohio State in that season opener than a lot of people expected them to. I will say the one thing about Tom Allen defenses is that they do throw a bunch of different looks at you, especially on the back end. They try to confuse the quarterback. So it should be, at the least, it'll keep J.J. McCarthy sharp. I do think he's going to, play really well. We talked about it with Prize Picks, got him throwing for a whole bunch of yards. Your thoughts on Michigan going up against this Indiana defense that has struggled? Maybe not as much as their offense, like we'll talk about, that has a new coordinator, but they have definitely struggled.
I want to piggyback off your comment about the play calling really quick too, in that it just seems like operationally they are very much meat and potatoes. This is what we are. And there's some creative stuff they do off the things they do really well. I think they do a nice job picking their spots. And in the span of a game, there's always going to be a play call you don't like, or a play call or two you wish you could have back. But like you think of the Philly special thing against TCU last year. I think that was a Matt Weiss special, right? If I'm remember correctly.
Think so, yeah, because I guess he was running the red zone stuff. So,
well, he's gone anyway, so we can throw him under the bus. You look at Maryland at Ohio State last week, and Josh Gaddis brings in his backup quarterback to run out of the shotgun on 4th and 1. Like, there's not this silly, you don't see the silly stuff. And for as much as we talk about, obviously, our hometown Detroit Lions, San Francisco 49ers, I think Michigan's offense operates a lot in the same way, where they're smart, they're precise, they're gonna do what they do best. It might not always look pretty, but also when they need to break out a big play, they're able to do that as well. So I think there are some similarities there. But, in terms of this Indiana defense, we've seen them play Michigan tough in the past. Last year's game, that first half, and there were some extenuating circumstances over that, but you still have to play the game. Michigan and JJ McCarthy really turned it on in that second half. I think he figured out that Indiana defense. I think that
they let him throw too. I think
they let him throw. Yeah, that was one of those we'll let JJ McCarthy beat us type of games, and that was one of our first chances to see what that could look like. So for me, it's going to be a little ugly if the weather is what it's forecasted to be. But I look at this Indiana defense, and they did a nice job of kind of holding Ohio State in check, though, as the weeks have gone on. I mean, just something is just off about that Ohio State offense, and maybe it is their quarterback situation. I don't know, but too many big plays allowed against Maryland. I think that's something that Michigan will want to exploit. I think it's going to be another week where they just kind of gut it out on the ground and take their shots when they're able to in the passing game. And I hate to keep using this as a refrain, but I just think when you look at the matchup and what I expect Michigan to do, it's probably going to look like all the other ones have.
Yeah, I agree. They do have a couple of decent players, a lot of 6-year seniors, a lot of graduate guys on each level of the defense, and guys that have made some plays, a couple guys with a few interceptions. One guy, Andre Carter, Western Michigan transfer, comes in. He has 20 pressures already in the year. That's set on the year. That is second in the Big Ten. And then I wanted to go back too. You mentioned that, which is a great point. The Niners and Lions kind of run that same trick play Michigan ran against Rutgers. And I thought it was interesting because someone brought that up to Kirk Campbell, Michigan's quarterbacks coach, on Wednesday. And he said that's a Sunday project for him to kind of watch all levels of football, FCS, FBS, NFL especially. And they're kind of always looking at what other teams are doing. He said a lot of it is Niners and Lions, but every team. But I mean, Niners and Lions, nobody runs a better designed offense right now in the NFL, in my opinion, than those two, especially the Niners. But the Lions feel like they're nearing that level. Not to talk too much about our beloved 4-1 ball club, but so I thought that was good to hear, from that standpoint, and then really interesting that they're doing that, and it seems like this staff, especially under Jim Harbaugh, has done that for many, many years, given his NFL roots. But I thought that was one of the more interesting things that we kind of heard this week talking to some players and coaches. Let's flip over to the Michigan defense. Look, we kind of talked about it with the third quarter stuff and just the dominance overall with winning these games by such big margins. But the stat of the week, this one's from Max Olson of The Athletic, but Michigan has played 313 plays on defense over its first 6 games. Not once have they allowed an opponent to get inside the 10-yard line. They have not defended one first and goal. It's insane. You could say, oh, they're allowing too many big touchdowns. They have had a couple out of the 3 touchdowns they've allowed, but this is really impressive. No one's got inside the 10. So I guess we could say one of the unanswered questions is Michigan's goal line defense. We haven't seen it. They have no game reps.
Through 6 weeks. That's insane.
It's ridiculous.
3 touchdowns in 6 weeks. That's crazy. I mean, even again, and you see like that Rutgers game, like you just see how easy it is to, just have a busted coverage and for another team to score. And the fact that they've been that on task, it remains so impressive to me. You look at this Indiana offense. I think I saw they're averaging 3.2 yards per carry. If you can't run the ball against Michigan, if you can't hold up in a fist fight like that, you're in trouble. And that right side of Indiana's offensive line has not pass blocked well at all. I know there's been a lot of pressure that's come from that side of the line, and the left side has done a fine job. And Zach Carpenter, their center, former Michigan guy, has done a solid job as well. But I mean, it just feels like if they have to drop back to pass to give themselves a shot, which it seems like that's what they want to do under the new offensive coordinator, Rod Carey. I mean, I just that's playing right into Michigan's hands, in my opinion. So for me, that's where things are at right now. I don't know. You look at, there's some nice size that Indiana has at wide receiver, but other than that, I mean, I just don't. There's some skill talent in the backfield, but man, this Michigan defense might be the best Michigan defense I've ever seen. And that's going back to, I don't really remember 97, but that's going back to, the early 2000s, the 2006 team. Some of the teams we've seen recently that Michigan's thrown out there. I mean, they're that good and they're that on it. And I have no doubts that they'll be able to greatly limit what the Hoosiers throw out there.
Yeah, in terms of my lifetime and me remembering stuff, I mean, 06, 16, those two seem to be the standard when it comes to Michigan defenses. I think this is right up there. I think you could say, maybe last year, but you want to perform better at the end of the year, or at least the last game of the season. So I agree. We'll see how it holds up in those games because I think that's really going to determine it. But you're right. And then Mike Elston with some really interesting comments, I thought, on Wednesday, talking about the pass rush. Michigan has 14 sacks. It ranks 45th in the country. It's not bad. They're a little bit lower than their pace from last year. But again, I mean, you got to kind of factor in the schedule at this point. But he seemed frustrated, and he did use the word frustrated that nobody's dropping back and passing on them. Traditionally, it's either they're max protecting or they're doing a lot of bootlegs, a lot of rollouts, a lot of waggle type of stuff, or they are doing a lot of quick game stuff, getting the ball out quickly so these pass rushers can't impact the game, to which you also say that's how they're impacting the game. They're impacting the way other teams are playing. And Mike Elston said that all these teams have kind of changed their identity each and every week, which is crazy to think about. And you even think about, I know Minnesota did a lot of rollouts coming into the game, but I mean, how many straight dropbacks were there for Minnesota last week? And Michigan got pressure on almost all of them. So that, at least that I can remember. So that is a huge piece of what this defense is doing. And he said, once teams do have to drop back and pass against us, then he feels that they're going to be ready for it. And that might be this week, to your point. And I was going to bring up the same thing. So I think it's a great point. New offensive coordinator for Indiana, Carey, who has been a head coach at Northern Illinois. He's been a head coach at Temple as well. He won the MAC twice at Northern Illinois, I believe. So, and what it seems like from talking to Seth Toe, who covers the team over in Bloomington, he was saying that really the best thing they've done this year is drop back and pass. Let Taven Jackson, their quarterback, kind of extend plays a little bit. Maybe not to the way J.J. McCarthy does, but he's mobile back there, can run around and make some plays. And that's not – they weren't doing that enough under the last offensive coordinator. And that – he thinks they're going to open up the passing game a little bit more, to which I say maybe this will be the week where we see that Michigan pass rush kind of heat up a little bit. I think Josiah Stewart is playing his best football now. Braden McGregor, we saw him get a sack a couple weeks ago. I feel like all those guys are playing a little bit better, and we could see the Michigan pass rush really start to get some more production.
Yeah, and I forgot where I saw it, so apologies for whoever deserves the credit on this, but I think halfway through the season, Michigan's like 7 or 8 sacks off the pace that they've typically set under Jim Harbaugh. And that water can come crashing back to the level in 1 or 2 games, if they pile up on you. And forgive me, but didn't they have like 7 or 8 sacks last year at Indiana? Am I remembering that correctly?
That sounds right. A lot of them came late in that game when they really just started to harass Connor Bazelak. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wonder if this is a week to be a candidate for that. Get that second half of the season started on a high note. Again, it's I think they have the talent there. I mean, Josiah Stewart is coming on. He's someone that should be a breakout guy down the stretch. I mean, we know Jalen Harrell's been terrific as a 3-down defender. Braden McGregor, I think, has been more disruptive than maybe the box score would indicate for him. Derek Moore, I think. Again, I have to go back and check. I think he's one of this team's highest graded defenders, period, right now, certainly as a pass rusher. So, they are disruptive, and they are getting teams, to change the way that they call plays. And I think when it's a fine line, right? Because when you don't have the sack production, or maybe even some of the pressures you would expect to get, but you're fundamentally changing what the offense's game plan is and knocking them out of their identity week in and week out. To me, that's worth its weight in pressures and sacks, regardless. Like if that's what the trade-off is. So I know that they have the talent and the depth to be as disruptive as anyone. I mean, it's the depth, it's the athleticism, it's the physicality. Those guys have been great. And again, maybe this is the week where it all water finds its level in terms of the sack production. But I mean, they're super capable there. And really, they haven't had to blitz or do a ton of exotic things to bring pressure either. Those guys are just getting the job done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this could be the week for that for sure. A couple numbers I dug up on Taven Jackson. So his average throw depth of past the line of scrimmage is 10 yards. That's the fifth most in the Big Ten. I think JJ's fourth with just, I think like 10.6 or something like that. So he's right there. And then 2.84 seconds is the amount of time he's averaging before he throws, which is longer than JJ McCarthy. I mean, they're not throwing a ton of quick stuff. I mean, maybe they will and change their identity against Michigan. But I think that they're going to let him run around a little bit back there. And the only guy that has really done that against Michigan is Doug Brumfield of UNLV. And he tried to extend those plays, but then the Michigan pass rush just got there. So I think we could see that. You mentioned the right side of the line. That's what Michigan exploited last year as well. You almost felt bad for a couple of those guys that were getting abused in that game, especially late when Michigan really slammed the door in Bloomington last year. So, yeah, that's pretty much the Michigan defense against this Indiana offense. Special teams.
Really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did look it up. It was 7 sacks last year.
Okay.
So
7
maybe
sacks.
maybe that number returns when we do a bold predictions piece. Hint, hint.
There we go. I think it will then, based on that hint. Good kicker for Indiana. So, we've talked about it, and it's crazy that we talk about it almost on a weekly basis. But how do you avoid that shutout potentially? If you're a Michigan opponent, you have a decent kicker that can help. He's 5 for 5 this year. He doesn't seem to have a ton of range. They've only attempted a couple outside of 30 yards, but he has made a 42-yarder. 2 of them have come from 30 plus there. And then in the return game, Jalen Lucas, a guy who really broke out last year, was first team All-American as a return specialist. He had 2 kickoff return touchdowns a year ago, hasn't had any this year, but he's dangerous. Jim Harbaugh singled him out during his radio show as the first guy on the entire team that they need to watch. So he'll definitely be somebody to keep an eye on, number 12 on Saturday. Let's talk about our predictions for this game. And before we do, we want to talk about our friends over at Rogue Shop. Go to rogueshop.com. If you have issues sleeping, chronic pain, or have anxiety or stress, when you use the promo code The Wolverine, you get 10% off your order. Rogue Shop sells CBD, THC, edibles, tinctures, smokables, bath salts, pain creams, topicals, vapes, candles, and soaps. They handcraft all of their topical soaps, candles, bath salts, massage oils, and tinctures. They grow their own cannabis in their manufacturing facility out in Wisconsin. All their products are made with cannabis. Their website, which you can see right now on your screen if you're watching on YouTube, has a 24/7 chat function where customers can ask them anything, and they're very responsive, and you basically lay out what you're looking for, and they will give you the answer. And as we listed all those products, they have just about everything. So there is something for you over at rogueshop.com. All their edibles are custom formulated with cannabis, vitamins, and plant materials. They're America's #1 online dispensary and health and wellness shop. They are a true small business. So go to rogueshop.com. That's ROGUESHOP.com. Use the promo code The Wolverine for 10% off your order. Anthony, let's talk about some predictions. Who's going to break out and have a good game on offense? Same thing on defense. We'll start on the offensive side of the ball. I'm going to go with Blake Corum. I think this is kind of the game for him. Maybe a little bit more limited in what you can do through the air, depending on the rain, depending on some of the winds. Really, 15 miles an hour. It's a decent amount of wind, but at the big house, it's swirling in there most of the time anyway. So we'll see how it impacts. But I just think Blake Corum will get going again. He only had, I think, 9 carries last week. They've really been able to limit what he's done, and they've kept the tread on the tire, as Jim Harbaugh has said. I think they'll continue to do that, but I do think he's going to have another nice game.
Darn it. I'm going to keep pounding the table for it, and maybe it becomes the new Andrel Anthony's the player of the game, but Donovan Edwards is getting in the end zone this week. Somehow, some way, by hook or by crook, Donovan Edwards' breakout game this weekend. So you heard it here first.
He was so close. He was so close on Saturday at Minnesota For sure. He's definitely due. I mean, I would not have bet that would have 0 touchdowns in the first half of the regular season. On the defensive side, I'm going to go with Josiah Stewart to have another really good game. I feel like he's kind of hitting his stride here. He's leading the team right now with 3 sacks, pretty spread out when you look at the sack production on this team. And we kind of talked about why the numbers maybe are a little bit lower earlier as well. But his pressure rate in true pass sets, 18%. It's second in the Big Ten, leads the team right now. Only, I think, just over 50 pass rush snaps for Josiah Stewart, but he's made the most of them. I think we could continue to see him in those situations a little bit more, and I think he'll have a solid game in there. He's also holding up against the run when he's in there too. I think that's an overlooked aspect of his game. And then his sack last week too was one of the 2 was on a nice power move. And you would think of him as a speed guy, but he's got some power too at 6'1", I think 245. So I'm going to go with Josiah Stewart to continue his hot streak.
I didn't think too hard about this one. This is I'm coming up with it on the spot. Let's go with Mr. Club Hand himself, Mason Graham. I think he'll have another.
It's a good pick.
It's a safe pick, but it's the vanilla pick, so to speak. But Mason Graham is incredible, and the fact that we talked to Cam Good earlier this week, and he said, "Man, that club's a weapon. Like maybe we should all get one." He's so good. I don't know how to describe it. He's well-rounded in his game, and I think that he's going to continue to be disruptive. So Mason Graham, for me, another big week with that club on his hand.
He's definitely the flavor of the week. I mean, the amount of times I've heard people, and I was saying, I mean, the whole trip home from Minnesota, Chris and I are like, God, can you believe Mason Graham? He was fantastic. We'll see how he follows up that performance. Also, with the club, he said it should get smaller and smaller as the weeks go on, so we'll see how that kind of plays out. Maybe we'll get I don't know how you'd measure that, but we'll get some sort of measuring stick out there. Try to get exactly the dimensions on that thing. But it was really big for the first game with it on. Final score predictions for this game. I've done it a couple times. Michigan has almost gotten a shutout this year. If those backups don't screw this thing up, I'm going 31-0. Michigan, I think that, the weather could play a factor in that way where I think Michigan can score more than this on Indiana. But I do think, with some of the backups coming in late in the game, it'll be a little bit tougher. They'll stick to the ground. So I'm going to go 31-0, kind of a ho-hum type of game. They won 29-7 against Indiana a couple of years ago. It was kind of a boring game. I feel like it'll be semi-similar on Saturday.
Yeah, a return to boring. And again, it's another week where if it comes down to the shutout for the staff pick, you and I are going to be duking it out. I have 31-3. I think they're rolling right now. I think that with the weather, it's probably going to cool down some of the potential fireworks. But yeah, it's going to be slow and ugly. The weather's going to be kind of a bummer, one of those gloomy October days. But again, it's just going to look like the other ones have, and maybe some people are annoyed that it doesn't look like the Nebraska or the Minnesota game. But 31-3 is my pick.
That's a score very similar to basically what those first 4 games were. But yeah, we'll be sweating that out in the press box with the staff predictions. I think Doug Skeen won last week, so congrats to him. Let's get into a few games from around the country in our last segment. No man knows the future, and a few good ones. We also have a trophy game that we'll talk about in just a second. But number 3, Ohio State at Purdue is the game we will start with. Purdue, a 19.5-point home underdog. Over-unders at 49. I don't think Purdue's good. I've thought that Purdue is terrible all year long. I know they have played a little bit better. They've picked up their level of play, but I think Ohio State comes in here and wins that one pretty handily, covering the spread.
I'm with you on Ohio State. I don't think they played well against Maryland. The score does not indicate how I saw that game going for them, but at some point, if you're Ohio State and you want to be taken seriously as a legit contender for not just the Big Ten, but the college football playoff, you got to start imposing your will a little bit more. And I think they probably will this week. And then ahead of next week's game, the big noon game against Penn State, huge pecking order game in Columbus next weekend. But yeah, I think Ohio State covers that number.
All right. And then Oregon, number 8 in the country at number 7, Washington a 3-point favorite at home, over under 66. Maybe definitely the best matchup of the week. Probably going to be a really fun one as well. Potentially one of the more fun games of the season. I'm going to go with Washington at home. I think, Bo Nix against Michael Penix. I think I trust Michael Penix in that great receiving core just a little bit more. Home field advantage. I'm going to go with the Washington Huskies.
Yeah, this is tough. Essentially, Washington's a 3-point favorite. That's basically a pick 'em game if it were on a neutral field. It's not on a neutral field though, but when I look at it, I just think that Oregon's just a little bit better defensively. I think the talent's a little bit better on defense for them, and I think that's going to be, in these types of shootout games, you got to get off the field or turn over the team in a critical situation. And I think that Dan Lanning in Oregon will be the team that does that. So give me Oregon.
All right. And then next game, number 10, USC at number 21, Notre Dame. Notre Dame season basically dead here. Notre Dame, a 3-point favorite, over under 60. Don't know what to expect. I mean, USC that defense is not very good. They almost blew that game last week against Jed Fish in Arizona. Something tells me, though, that it feels too easy to pick Notre Dame in this game with just the stylistic advantage maybe they have in physicality, home field advantage. USC beat them by 11 last year. This feels pretty similar to me in how these two teams are. Maybe Notre Dame's a little bit better with Hartman back there, but that offense is struggling. I'm going to go with USC.
Just for entertainment's sake, I'll go with Notre Dame. I don't take USC seriously at all as a national title contender, as a playoff team. I think their defense is still playing at a low Power 5 to MAC level, and that's just how Lincoln Riley teams play. So little bit of a glimpse into what life in the Big Ten might look like with a team in Big Ten country, not in the Big Ten, but that plays like a lot of teams in the Big Ten will. So I'm going with Notre Dame.
All right. I held off on this game because I wanted to make sure we have the photo up on the screen, but Michigan State at Rutgers. Rutgers, a 4.5-point favorite, over under 39. Should be an exciting game. They're playing, you got to throw the records out, Anthony. When you're playing for the Situation Trophy presented by Axe Body Spray, you throw the records out between these two teams. It is going to be an all-out brawl in Piscataway. Should be a really good, fun game with the over-under at 39. Your thoughts on this game?
Sorry, the photo. If you're watch, I mean, it's just so off-putting, and it's like a photo you can smell. You just smell how terrible that is. I don't know, man. I mean, I could see Michigan State winning this game, leading to some false bravado heading into next week's game in East Lansing. So I'll go Michigan State. I don't know if they'll win. I think they will cover though, and this is going to be a good old-fashioned Big Ten slap fight.
Yeah, I had no clue in this one either. I'm going to go with Michigan State as well. Neither team's good, and I don't know. Maybe Michigan State can hang in, and just not sure. Just have no clue about this game. But it will be fun to see someone parade that trophy around the field after the game. And then the last one, Iowa at Wisconsin. Wisconsin, 9.5-point favorite, over under 34 points. These are my top two contenders coming into the year. I think they were for you as well, AB, in the Big Ten West. It looks like Wisconsin's to lose at this point, especially with the Cade McNamara injury. Wisconsin with that 9.5 points that they're giving. I'm going to take Iowa. It's just the Big Ten West. Like, doesn't seem to be a lot of blowouts. It seems like when when the favorite's about to emerge, then somebody plays them close or beats them. So I'm going to go with Iowa to at least keep it within that 9.5.
Yes. I'm going to go with Wisconsin, but when that over under plus the 9.5 looks, I wouldn't bet this game at all, but
no,
if I had to make a pick, I think I would say Wisconsin wins, 24-14, something like that. I think Wisconsin will cover though. Iowa's just so bad offensively. Poor Deacon, was it Deacon Hill? I believe the guy's name, just not ready for this at all. So
no, not at all. Yeah. Agree. So we'll see how those games play out. Should be a good slate of college football on Saturday. Michigan against Indiana, noon on Fox. You can follow all the coverage over at thewolverine.com. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like this video, hit that thumbs up button as well as the subscribe button. Thank you for all of your support, and we'll see everyone next time.